Good afternoon and welcome to the Cost of Inaction, Climate Threats and Solutions for Arizona, a special presentation by the ASU Global Institute of Sustainability and Innovation and the Environmental Defense Fund. It is my pleasure to introduce Dave White. Dave, please take over.
Thank you, Jason. I'm very pleased to introduce Mayor Kate Gallego to provide our opening comments. Mayor Kate Gallego is the second elected female mayor in Phoenix's history and the youngest big city mayor in the United States. She graduated from Harvard University and earned her MBA from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. Before being elected to the Phoenix City Council, Mayor Gallego worked on economic development for the local utility Salt River Project. Mayor Gallego is focused on three key policy areas during her time in office: diversifying the economy, strengthening infrastructure investment, and working to make Phoenix a leader in sustainability. And this priority on sustainability is one of the main reasons that we're very proud at Arizona State University to partner with Mayor Gallego. And I should also say that in my part-time, I serve as the chair of the Water and Wastewater Rate Advisory Committee, working with the Water Services Department, City Manager's Office, and Mayor and Council. And it's been my great pleasure to work alongside Mayor Gallego and her amazing team at the City of Phoenix. So thank you so much for joining us, Mayor, and we appreciate your welcoming comments.
Wonderful, Dave. Thank you for the great introduction. Thank you to ASU and the Environmental Defense Fund for convening us for this important conversation. Leading on sustainability is important to me, but it's also important to the future of our city. We're grateful, Dave, for your service leading our water advisory panel. And I'm pleased to share with you in recent polling, the number one issue that Phoenix voters agree on is securing our water future. We all know we have to get this right. We are a desert city. As we can innovate in the area of climate change and sustainability, we can thrive. And that's one of the reasons we're here today. Climate change is a huge challenge, but I hope also an opportunity for us to lead the way. I think some of the folks here today and many of you who are signed into the webinar are among the folks who are going to come up with the solutions, and so many of them will come from Arizona. It's, as you heard a little bit about, it's an issue of personal importance to me. I hold an environmental degree from my undergraduate background, and my original involvement with the city of Phoenix was serving on our then known as Environmental Quality Commission. So it's now renamed and gotten sustainability added to the name of the commission. I also have a degree in environmental degree, so old that people didn't have sustainability degrees when I began, and I don't feel like I'm that old, but that shows how much this field has evolved and how many things have changed and improved. When I first got involved at the city of Phoenix, we would talk about 3 kilowatts of solar and pat ourselves on the back, and now we're about to cut the ribbon on our 50th project, and now we're talking more in the 10 megawatt range and having multiple projects. So it's been neat to see the growth rate, how much more we are able to do, how much more efficiently, and that gives me optimism about solutions, which we need to have here. Our voters in 2015 voted for a general plan in Phoenix saying that we would be the most sustainable desert city in the world. So high marching orders, but I think that we are up for a great challenge, and we hope to lead in a variety of different areas to get there, whether circular economy. We have some folks at the city of Phoenix who are globally known as leaders in the circular economy. We hope to continue to invest in and preserve our Sonoran Desert, such an ecologically diverse and important place. And I got to tell you, as someone who's spent much of 2020 hiking with her 4-year-old and spending time outside, I am so grateful that Phoenix is the city with more acres of parks than any other in the United States, because we've needed the great outdoors as we've navigated the pandemic. The city of Phoenix is updating our climate action plan. So we've had one for quite a while, but now we are moving on and trying to get more ambitious to match what's happening in our community. So many of our large companies now have ambitious climate action plans. Our utilities are moving forward with net zero goals. And so we are going to step up and do more as we talk about accelerating our net zero emission goals from 2060 to 2050, or perhaps with the innovations we're going to talk about today even sooner. We're going to talk even more at the City of Phoenix about continued outreach and equity work, understanding that we need to involve our entire community as we move forward with that climate action plan. People are policy, and we're lucky to have great leaders at the City of Phoenix who are moving forward. Mark Hartman from our team is going to be providing you an update as part of the panel. And we're hoping to get even more support there. I'm a believer that people are policy. And this year in the budget, I'm a strong supporter of our new heat office, which is about a $2.8 million investment with 14 additional positions to address climate change and heat readiness. That includes Cool Corridors program, which implements tree plantings and heat mitigation strategies in our most vulnerable neighborhoods, aided by the wonderful research from Arizona State University, including our Walkshed mapping tool, which helps us target those investments where they will help the most. We do have a lot of work to do in that area. The number of people we've lost in our community to heat is too high and unacceptable. And I hope that we can, again, invest in solutions. The City of Phoenix has put out requests for proposals for $14 million in facilities to address those who are most heat vulnerable. And we expect some really great innovative proposals that will put heat preparation and readiness at the forefront. So those requests will come out at the end of April if anyone is interested in applying in that area. Our heat office is not yet officially approved, so it does have to go through our full budget office, our budget proposal. And if you want to join us on May 18th at our budget meeting and so show support for climate change, tree investments, heat readiness, we would certainly welcome you at our 2:30 budget meeting, which you can participate from via WebEx. While I'm talking with folks from ASU, I just want to say a huge thank you for your partnership in making us a smarter, more equitable, and more climate-focused city. It's not just the Walkshed tool, but helping us with measuring the impact of our programs, whether it be our Cool Pavement program or how we manage our water supply. Dave's been very involved with that. Dr. Vanos and other ASU researchers, thank you for your partnership. It's not going to be easy to meet beyond our current goals for climate change, and net zero is ambitious, but we want to make it there and do innovative partnerships along the way. So you'll get to hear more about those partnerships from Mark Hartman, from our solar work to electric vehicles to more. And we are very excited to just be getting started with this. We have a lot of work to do, but with the folks who are involved today and participating, I'm very optimistic that Phoenix can lead the way. Thank you for rising to the challenge of climate change and sustainability. And thank you for helping Phoenix with our many investments. Back to you, Dave.
Thank you, Mayor, for those comments, and thank you to you and to everyone at the city. Phoenix has emerged as a national and truly a global leader in climate action and sustainability. And you've mentioned only a few of the initiatives that I know you and your team members are working on. Thank you, for example, in your leadership in the C40 Cities Network, and we could go on and on about the initiatives. Phoenix and our region has the opportunity to demonstrate how a city can be sustainable and resilient and be economically prosperous, equitable, just, and inclusive, and really provide examples to cities in the US and around the world. So we're very proud to partner with you and appreciate your efforts, and look forward to hearing more from Mark in particular, as well as Jenny and LG about the partnerships that we can create together moving forward to advance your ambitious agenda. So thank you again, Mayor Gallego, for joining us. Now I would like to invite our panelists to join, turn on your cameras. As our panelists are joining, I'd like to remind all of our attendees that you are free to add questions through the Q&A button on the Zoom link on the Zoom channel. And that way we can compile the questions. So please put the questions in the chat, in the Q&A section as we go. And that way we'll compile those and we'll ask those questions as we get to the Q&A section. And so I'd like to now introduce just briefly our panelists, and then we're going to ask each panelist to give an extended introduction and a highlight of 2 to 3 of the most critical points, initiatives, efforts that are underway as we all collectively attempt to address these climate threats. And our focus today is really on solutions. We know there's a significant cost to inaction, and what we'd like to do today is focus on those solutions that we're collectively implementing through our partnerships to address the risks. And so our panel today includes myself. I'm the moderator. My name is Dave White. I'm the Deputy Director of the Global Institute of Sustainability and Innovation at Arizona State University. And I'm pleased also to welcome Mark Hartman, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer with the City of Phoenix, as well as Dr. Jennifer Vanas, or Jenny. And she is a assistant professor in the School of Sustainability at Arizona State University. And we're also pleased to be joined by LG Holstein, who is Senior Director for Strategic Planning with Environmental Defense Fund, EDF. And LG, you can go ahead and turn on your camera, and that'd be great. And so what I'd like to do is to go through the panelists, and we'll have LG kick us off to set the stage, talk a little bit about the challenges that we faced, to share a little bit about what the costs of inaction will be, and to describe the priorities for EDF and your goals in partnering both at the federal level, but also at the state and local level. So LG, please take it away.
Thank you very much, and hi everybody. It's great to be back with you. I recall being at ASU in person, and I'd hoped we would deal with the with this pandemic in time for me to get back there, but unfortunately, we're now all learning how to do this. So forgive the backdrop of my messy room here, and the cat may walk across the keyboard. But I do want to start by mentioning just a quick little personal story. This happened 20 years ago. I was working in the government at the time, and I went to Alaska, and I was with some scientists, and we were up on the tundra, and one of them took out a regular old garden trowel and dug a hole deep enough. He told me, "Go ahead and stick your arm in the hole," and I put my arm down up to about my elbow. And I could feel the ice of the permafrost that I'd heard about my whole life, but I could also feel that it was melting. The permafrost was melting. And all of that means in terms of the indigenous people who live there, the shift in the whole biology of the area, the many consequences of that for releasing carbon into the atmosphere that for so many centuries have been held. Well, over those last couple of decades since I had that incredible personal experience, of course, the science of measuring the impacts of climate change, global warming, has become so much clearer, where almost virtually every field of science has been validating what we have long feared was happening with the impacts on our planet, on animals, and of course on our communities and of humans. And so we now know that climate change is driving growing amounts of drought and all that comes with it in terms of crop failures and wildfires. It's also driving the weird and wild weather of hurricanes happening with greater intensity. Even thunderstorms dumping more water. More of our precipitation, our farmers tell us, is happening in intensive amounts, in short bursts, rather than the kind of longer extended sprinkling that's so much better for the crops. And of course, we've learned a lot about the impacts on human health and the environment, including the disproportionate impacts in particular for those communities that are less equipped to deal with extreme weather or may live in places, an example would be ports or around airports or something, where the impacts of localized pollution are greater for those individuals and families. So in listening to the mayor, I'm reminded, as those of us who work in Washington, D.C. need to be reminded from time to time, that even if the problems that we are describing are national and international in scope, the solutions are local. And the solutions, and we talked about this at the last ASU conference on this subject, the solutions have to be tailored to the circumstances, including the political environment, let's face it, but also the economic circumstances and the attitudes of and inspiration of people at the state and local level, if we're going to actually bring about the kind of change that we need. And I have total confidence that we do have the greatest brains in the world at our academic institutions to be brought to bear on these problems, and that we can bring about the solutions we need. But time is of the essence. And that's one of the other messages we're getting from the scientists, is that we have so little time to take the action we need in order to start bending that curve of climate changing greenhouse gas emissions downward. And that's why we're very enthusiastic at Environmental Defense Fund, the opportunities that we have working with the new Biden administration, which is coming forward with infrastructure proposals and stimulus proposals that take care of our longstanding historical needs like roads and bridges, but also taking care of, if you will, the new infrastructure. How do we get our steel plants, our cement plants to be more energy efficient, to emit fewer greenhouse gas emissions? How can we go after the low-hanging fruit, which is the transportation sector, and really electrify that so we're not putting unnecessary amounts of emissions into the air? And other types of solutions that are going to cost money, yes, but will also, I think, rely upon the local circumstances and initiatives of people like Mayor Gallego, who has described some of the efforts that are underway there in the Phoenix area. So all of that is terrifically important. I'm going to mention just a couple of things very quickly and just to
LG, why don't we, I want to come back to you on several of these key points that you've mentioned, including the infrastructure question and some of EDF's critical priorities. Let's move through just the brief introductions with the other panelists, and then we'll circle back and hit on some of those key priorities for EDF.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks. So next I'm going to move for the extended introduction to Mark Hartman with City of Phoenix. So Mark, can you just tell us a little bit about your office, your work, and then as we cycle through, we'll come back and talk specifically in depth about some of your priorities.
Sure, and hi, and welcome, and good to be here in this conversation. So yeah, as Chief Sustainability Officer for the city, the goal is to really fulfill what the mayor had outlined to be, how does Phoenix become the most sustainable desert city on the planet? And I like the reference of LG, who made reference to local action. You know, cities are, through these actions, rehearsing our future, that they are able to try and pilot and do and see these practical solutions. You know, it's interesting as we talk about, you know, our unique role, although I'll speak, you know, in general terms, cities that we talk to, there's many actions. I'll talk mostly about Phoenix here, but cities around the globe are doing some pretty cool things. But our unique role is certainly on the desert side. And you know, some say, oh, well, what do you, cities shouldn't even be in a desert, but actually, you know, desert are actually, we're naturally desert adapted. Not only the trees are desert adapted, the people are desert adapted, a lot of our functions. You know, so, you know, the idea of the extreme conditions of a desert, well, you know, adversity has its own gifts. And it really does teach us things about how to do things differently. I would say though that, you know, with historic disparities, we haven't equitably applied those solutions throughout our city. So I think the real focus has been in the last few years, rightly so, that we need to actually, for those disproportionately affected, we need to actually provide a disproportionate amount of investment in those communities, particularly cooling solutions and ones to actually make it. as the Earth is turning up the temperature, we certainly will even have greater challenges in the future. So, but we're really fortunate for ASU, kind of the epicenter of research related to heat. It is really, we're so benefiting from being in the proximity of that research and being the recipients of that. And it's really catalyzed where it was, I would say, if I can, say historically, it was somewhat more on the academic side. It's really moved to the practical. And so working very closely, even with Jenny, one of the co-panelists, working with her and on phone calls with her about specific solutions in the specific schools, and with others on the faculty about solutions, and even around the cool pavements that we're putting. Phoenix now has more cool pavement than any other city in the world. So we're talking with C40 cities around the globe and talking about how we're doing it and able to do that much more quickly than typically and historically. So really a lot of exciting actions we're doing relating to cooling. And one last reference is just, we've mentioned the climate action plan, and traditionally climate action plans are very much focused on just specifically looking at greenhouse gas emissions. But for us, we say, hey, climate's one of the 5 C's of Arizona, and our climate very much related to heat and water and greenhouse gas emissions along with that. So our solutions there's going to be a specific heat section related to that. So many of the solutions we're talking about today will be things that will feature and set some ambitious goals related specifically to those. So there you go. There was my initial spiel.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate that. And a perfect segue for Dr. Vanasse to talk about her work. So why don't you tell us, Jenny, what do you do at ASU? What is a professor of sustainability study, and how do you work with the city to advance the use-inspired science as we talk about at ASU? So thank you, Mark, for recognizing that the university, in our charter, we talk about taking fundamental responsibility for the economic, social, cultural, environmental well-being of the communities we serve. So that's part of our mission, part of our charter, and it's great to hear that's being recognized by our partners.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dave. Hi, everyone. As Dave mentioned, I'm an assistant professor in the School of Sustainability. My background is in atmospheric and environmental sciences, and I predominantly focus on the impacts of extreme heat and air quality to urban populations, and really focus on those who might be more vulnerable to those impacts, and that ranges from person to person. And it's extremely energizing to work at a place like ASU. We're smack dab in the middle of the hottest city in the country, one of the hottest in the world, and one of the fastest growing counties. And I think that when we're able to have this living laboratory and have centers like the Urban Climate Research Center at ASU, we're really able to pull together a lot of different disciplinary experts to be able to solve some of these problems and really work hand in hand with different cities around, such as the city of Phoenix and other community groups. So bottom line up front, a few points that I like to hit, and I'd be happy to expand on these as we move forward. It's just related to extreme heat. All heat caused deaths are preventable. There's a lot we can do about it. There's a lot we know. And I think we need to move towards a zero vision on heat deaths in the city. Extreme heat and air pollution are problems now. They've been problems in the past. They exist now. And I think that we want to make sure we recognize that they are issues that we need to deal with now and not couch them only in climate change, because it might make people then assume let's deal with it in 50 years. Where we know we're losing lives now. We have extreme numbers of hospitalizations due to heat-related illness now. And so I think that's a really important point to get across. And the last point I'll mention is just, there's a lot that we know that we can do now and take action, and how we can adapt and how our communities can adapt. But working with communities as part of that, working with the cities, and really getting boots on the ground to do some of this. It's a collective effort to really understand these cascading or compounding impacts that we see in cities and that we are seeing increase. So I think it's important to understand that, but also important to understand that while we know a lot, there's still a lot that we do not know around these complex topics. And therefore, being able to do this research in a really applied manner with broader impacts can make a really big difference now and into the future.
Thanks, Jenny. I really appreciate those comments. And a couple threads are emerging just from the introductory notes, and one is the focus on urgent action now. Right, climate change is not a distant challenge; it is a challenge that we're facing. And as the United States National Climate Assessment concludes that the climate crisis is affecting American communities now. But American communities are also responding. They're responding in ways to make their cities more resilient, more economically vital, more just and equitable. And so this is not a future distant challenge. This is a challenge that we must face now, but it's also a challenge that gives us great opportunity for innovation, great opportunity to advance on a number of fronts. If we address some of these challenges, we'll improve the quality of life for our citizens across the board. So I'd like to return now to LG and pick up on something that you noted in your initial opening comments, LG, and that is there's unprecedented attention, proposed investment, and policy discussion at the federal level now to address the climate crisis. So what are some of EDF's most critical priorities, and how, from your perspective, could federal activity support state and local action? As you mentioned, at the state and local level is often where these solutions are developed and implemented, where mayors are focused on solving problems and serving their communities. They're close to their constituents. The federal agencies can provide investment, guidance, stimulation. So what are your priorities in working with the federal government, and how can that help us at the state and local level?
Thanks, Dave. And there's no doubt about the fact that solving this problem of climate change is going to take everyone playing a role. Some of the things that need to be done are sort of uniquely federal responsibilities, but others are things that will only work if they can be managed, carried out, and tailored at the local level, as I said in my opening remarks. Let me give you an example of the first category. What should the feds be doing? We believe that we need more investment in clean energy research and development. So whether that's bringing the cost of renewable energy down even more, it's already the cheapest new form of electricity generation. But we can do more to bring those costs down even more, and we can expand our renewable energy generation, for example, into the offshore areas, as they're planning to do off the East Coast. So research and development, that's an important thing. And another aspect of that is, how do you decarbonize big industries like cement and steel? We want those industries to thrive. We just want them to be cleaner. And we need research and development sponsored by the federal government, including working through our university systems around the country to find the best ways to do that. Also, carbon capture and sequestration, carbon removal. These are technologies that help us manage the emissions that come from the fossil fuels we're still using, and that we will obviously continue to use for some period of time. So that's the research and development component. What are some things that are on the federal agenda, if you will? And I'm here citing some things that President Biden has talked about, but people on both sides of the aisle have talked about. I'll mention just a couple of them. One of them is transportation. I called that the low-hanging fruit a few minutes ago. We really need to do something to electrify our transportation. The major US auto companies are saying this is where they want to go, this is where they intend to go. But we're not going to have electric vehicles in this country, and we're not going to be leading the world in electric vehicle production if we don't have charging stations. And so we need about 500,000 charging stations all around the country, and we need federal funds to make that kind of new infrastructure investment. So while we fix up the highways and bridges, let's be sure that the rest stations have charging stations for rapid charging. That's going to be critical to electrifying transportation, and that's something the federal government should be helping to pay for, just as they did in the original construction of the interstate highway system back in the 1950s. Two other quick examples. One is school buses. You have a young population in the Phoenix area, and you have growing school systems, and you have hundreds of school buses on the road every day. They burn diesel, and even though diesel fuel has gotten somewhat cleaner in recent years, the air quality inside a diesel fueled school bus can be 5, 6, 7, 8 times worse than it is outside. And so we're essentially trapping our kids in these buses using old and dirty technology when we already know and already have on the market electric school buses. They cost a little bit more at the front end, but they save money in the long term because their operation and maintenance costs are lower. This is particularly true if, as they're doing here in Virginia, if you were to link the school buses to the electric grid. So you have an electric school bus, it goes about its routes during the day, it's completely clean, and at the end of the day, it hooks up to the electric grid and provides that battery support just at the time of day that it would be hottest time of day. Most people are turning on their air conditioning, or maybe they're starting dinner, that sort of thing. And so the electricity use in the home is going to go up, and you need more electric power at that time. And guess what? The batteries in the school buses can provide that. And then later at night, when the demand is dropped down again, the school buses recharge to work the next day. That's something that we're very excited about seeing done at the federal level, and will be a priority for EDF and other organizations in working with Congress in the coming months. And one last one really does relate directly to the kind of economic growth engine that has been Arizona's story in recent years. And that is a new federal green bank, or green energy accelerator, some people are calling it. And the basic idea is to provide, and Joe Biden has proposed $30 billion for this, to create an initial infusion of capital that would be available for entrepreneurs, for business people, for local governments, let's say in Arizona, on a totally voluntary basis. Let's say you want to build a new warehouse, and you want to put on top of that warehouse solar arrays in order to help deal with the electrical needs of that building. You can take a loan or get a loan guarantee from this new federal green bank that we're hoping will pass the Congress as well. And then as the loans are repaid, that money goes back into the bank like a revolving fund and becomes available for the next project. And so this puts capital into the system. It provides a place where local entrepreneurs and governments can go to get funding in order to finance these green energy projects, well, all at the same time using the guidelines that a regular bank would use to be sure that it's a project that really is going to pay off in the end and going to bring benefits to everyone. So that's an example of 2 or 3 things that I think are high priorities as we go forward, and real opportunities for bringing both parties together in Congress to provide the funds to get going on some of these activities.
Great. Thanks, LG. We'll pick up on a couple of those threads, I think, in our discussion here, especially, talking about working with specifically with some of our most important and vulnerable populations, including school children. Much of Jenny's work has focused recently on building up resilience to heat impacts among schools, and also just the importance of integrated solutions. You talk about the energy transition, for example. This is not simply a technical challenge of building new electrification capacity. This is integrating across economic, social, and technological systems, and that's one of the focal areas of the sustainability perspective that Jenny and Mark and others bring. So Mark, let me turn to you. As you've described, the city is implementing a wide range of sustainability solutions to address the climate crisis. Many of them are discussed in the updated Climate Action Plan, which we invite all of our participants to weigh in on. There's a link in the chat to the current version of the plan, and an opportunity for your comment and feedback. One of the major challenges we face is extreme heat. So maybe can you narrow in, what is the city doing to mitigate urban heat? And how are you partnering across your city departments and with universities and others to address this challenge?
Sure, certainly. And if actually I can just do one quick shout out to LG and just say, he couldn't hear me because I was muted, but I was actually clapping, you know, and hearing what he's advocating for at the national level. So yeah, that's great that we each have our roles. So great he's there doing that for us. The cool, you know, the idea of cool corridors is really resonating, and people are saying, yes, this is what we desire here in the desert. Is we actually, you know, asked people, you know, if there was a cool pathway from where you live to nearby stores, would you walk more often than you do now? And 86% of people said yes, you know, so it's really something people go, oh, I'd love to have that, and love to have Google Maps give me the walking path of the most shaded route. And so our cool corridor concept we developed very much in partnership with ASU and many of the research teams there. This idea of like a mile-long corridor that goes in vulnerable neighborhoods that has, you know, basically 60 to 75% shade canopy through both structured and trees, and even on street corners, shading. So to really, I think the cool corridor concept, and even could be supplemented by things like our cool pavement. You know, the cool pavement technology is really interesting, is just how it can actually lower the neighborhood temperatures and really be a benefit. Particularly, the biggest benefit is not so much right at midday, but actually in the evening to be much cooler. So that's really where you really see the benefit of that. So, so certainly, you know, and I think a greatest outcome of all of this is we talk about, sure, yes, it's important the city's cooler and all these things, but I think that though it's not talked about much, is the social cohesion that comes with that. When people are able to walk more and able to be in their neighborhoods and find out who their neighbors are, that actually is the most beautiful thing of all. Like that's really, hey, isn't that that's a really side benefit that's not, you can look at it from a scientific point of view and maybe you kind of forget that beautiful human side. But, you know, we've gone away from the front porch societies that, you know, of the, you know, where everyone was on their front porch in the evenings and visited. You see a little bit of that in some neighborhoods in Phoenix, but not so much. But, you know, it's the whole idea of people being out and walking more and biking more and finding out who people are, and really creates social cohesion. I mean, there's been a lot of discohesion lately socially. And I think that the benefit of this, of actually just recognizing and meeting one another, I think is a real important aspect of this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. And I'm sure the social scientists on the call and at the university will very much appreciate that commentary about the importance of the social cohesion, the social capital that is built that allows people to create bonds with their fellow community members. And that is an important benefit of the investments that we're making in the heat mitigation that you described. And I want to just point out that we've shared in the chat, if you want to learn more about the City of Phoenix's climate actions and specifically about the cool pavement programs and other programs, there was a series, PBS Peril and Promise, in which Mayor Gallego spoke with Frank Cesna of PBS about specifically that program, and also featured one of our students from ASU, a master's student in the School of Sustainability, Dora Shortridge, who studies with Dr. Vanas, and Dora will actually be defending her master's thesis in about an hour, focused on exactly these kinds of challenges. So with that, we'll turn it over to Jenny. So Jenny, your research specifically aims, working with the Urban Climate Research Center at ASU and other partners across the university and with the city, you specifically look at strategies to mitigate extreme heat impacts, and you often focus on vulnerable population, including school children. Mm-hmm. So how does extreme heat impact different communities in the valley? And what do you find to be some of the biggest challenges in conveying the urgency or the seriousness of this problem?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I think I'm glad you added extreme heat impacts, like impacts to the end, because we often say, how can we mitigate extreme heat, but what about the impacts to people or water or energy? And so I think it's important to focus on those, and therefore by mitigating some of those heat levels, we can try and quantify the benefits to these other societal outcomes and impacts to the economy and environment. But in our work on extreme heat, what we know really well is that every single person copes with heat very differently. And then even when you look across the population, we know that one person's pathway to heat exposure differs tremendously from another person's pathway to heat exposure, or some people are just not exposed to heat in their everyday life. And it's really important to recognize those differences because in a way it can turn into a one-size-fits-one approach instead of a one-size-fits-all approach. And understanding that when we go down to the person level and think about what could have caused an individual to die of heat or to experience heat illness and end up in the emergency room, there's a lot of different factors. We do know that age is a big concern, and that as someone ages, they become less able to thermoregulate. And so we know that focusing on our elderly populations, especially those who might be more socially vulnerable or low income and not have some of the coping capacities, such as air conditioning or a working air conditioner, that's really important to focus on. What's their occupation? We know that males and outdoor workers are extremely vulnerable to heat in the valley. What can we do about that and take action now from the policy level to ensure that they're getting what they need to make sure they can work safely? And I think that connects to productivity and how does heat affect productivity and the bottom line for companies. And so by mitigating heat and providing cooler spaces, we can try to keep productivity up while keeping people safe. I think that's an important factor. Then when you think of pre-existing illness, if someone's on medications, are there issues with drug or alcohol use? What else could contribute that are either extrinsic or intrinsic factors in this individual's life that could have caused them to experience a heat death? And that's why I said at the start of this that all heat-caused deaths are preventable, because we can think about these vulnerabilities and do something about it. And that gets back to my idea about this is a now problem, and there is a lot we know now to protect the most vulnerable from heat. And we know that even as the air temperature varies, the vulnerability of our population in Maricopa County and the city of Phoenix can be a better predictor of the number of heat deaths than the temperature itself. And so while temperature is really important to mitigate for so many reasons, and we need to keep striving for solutions to mitigate air and surface temperatures across the city, it's a collective action across all of these other different potential solutions. And just related to children, I think, we're working in schools, we're working with schools, we're trying to co-produce some solutions, such as working in schoolyards in South Phoenix, where students have input in what they want their schoolyard to look like, what shady spaces they want to see, what plants they want to plant, and then they plant the trees. And that's where you get buy-in, and that's where you see empowerment to make changes on the small scale. But as LG said, those small scale changes will lead to big impacts. And so we know that while children are not as vulnerable to dying in extreme heat, we do know that there have been, just last year, there were 925 emergency department hospitalizations of children who are elementary school aged in the county. So I think that's important to recognize that there's this continuum of impacts. And it's not only deaths that matter, but it's that productivity, that health, that learning, the ability to be active and stay active and healthy is really important. And so the last thing I'll add here around this is just, as we think about what we know now and what we can do now that can help us adapt into the future to the changes we're seeing, we can think about looking back and where have we made progress? Where do we know that we've made a difference, and how can we keep implementing that on larger scales? And so when we think about the IPCC and their categories of adaptation, behavioral adaptation is a really important part of that. And that means education, educating people that acclimatization is important, that staying healthy is important to be able to handle extreme heat. There's a lot that you can do from the behavioral level, but then the infrastructure that we're talking about, the technological adaptations and the physiological adaptations, those all come together to help people stay safe in the heat. So I think that's an important point to make as well.
Great, thank you, Jenny. And I think one thing that really comes through clearly when you're talking about is extreme heat provides a perfect example of how this is a global challenge, right? Because we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We need to reduce and limit the impact of global climate change on median temperatures or average temperatures around the globe, but that translates into a specific local context. And then we know there are some uncertainties about those future impacts, but we have the knowledge and we have the capacity to act now to address many of those impacts and those outcomes. And we know how to do that in cooperation and collaboration with the people who are affected, as you say, to build that capacity, to build that ownership, and to build that agency for people to be able to take actions on their own. And so what I'd like to do now is I'd like to invite Sarah Porter to join the panel. Sarah is the director of the Kyle Center for Water Policy at the Morrison Institute at Arizona State University. And we've asked Sarah to listen into the panel and to provide her thoughts on kind of the key messages that she's heard across the different panelists. And I'll say one last encouragement for people joining. We have nearly 100 participants on this session. Love to hear some of your questions, so please include those into the Q&A section. I see several of our ASU students in there. If I don't get more questions from the audience, I'll start calling out specific students. So let's put some questions into that chat. Sarah, what are your sort of insights across everyone's comments so far?
Well, thank you. I want to thank you, Dave, for moderating and organizing the panel, and thank the panelists, all of you. The insights that you've contributed have been really helpful. And I also want to thank Jason and Lauren and Liz for all the work in organizing this important discussion. My big takeaways are, LG started out by saying all solutions are local, and I think that's because impacts are local, as well as other aspects that LG cited. And clearly, we've heard today that we often think about climate change in terms of greenhouse gas emissions or kind of data, but it's really it's very meaningful, I think, here in this conversation to personalize it so much and to think about the impacts on people all around us that we see when we walk across the campus, or I work at the downtown campus, especially walking downtown. As Mark well knows, it can be hot in the summertime, and there are people there who may not have access to relief from that heat. So I appreciate the fact that this discussion has connected the dots from the big picture issues to the local. But what LG said, that solutions need to be tailored to local is, really makes sense. And I especially appreciated the insight that they need to be tailored politically as well. And there is a question from Adam Weichman, which I hope the panelists will address, which kind of gets to that. How do we move the political process in a way to get to solutions? We heard from LG some really practical things that are kind of exciting. I had no idea. I knew that diesel buses were bad. I had no idea how bad they were. Appreciated that input. And an exciting idea for a revolving fund. So these are issues that a green bank, energy bank revolving fund, these are things that we can get behind. We can find out more about them, and if appropriate, contact our representatives and help support some of these things. But to go more local, Mark's characterizing Phoenix as a place, as with other cities, that is rehearsing our future was a great insight. Clearly, the city's well along on addressing climate impacts, but it is in cities, and we've heard it loud and clear today, working alongside researchers like Dr. Vanas, where these solutions can be tested. I'm very interested to hear Phoenix being characterized as really kind of the test bed city for sustainable desert city. And it makes me proud as an ASU employee to know that ASU's use-inspired research is being integrated into that test bed process. I hope that we'll have a map of the cool corridors one of these days so that we can go walk them and enjoy them ourselves. And then finally, Dr. Vanas really contributed, I think, this important idea of how this affects humans, and it was poignant for me to think about how children are particularly affected, and of course reminded me that this is a discussion about their future more than anything else. So they are particularly vulnerable, as are the elderly, but they are also particularly in the long term affected by the decisions. And as you said, Dr. Vanas, It's happening now. These are things that it's not something out in the future. We want these solutions to be implemented, but we're seeing impacts now. So those are kind of what I heard as the big themes, and I see that a lot of good questions have come in. So I'm looking forward to responses to those questions.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. And Sarah, please, stay with us for the remainder of the panel. And what I'd like to propose is we have some great questions coming in. So what we're going to try to do is a bit of a rapid fire. So give me your 30-second most important insight answer, and I'll try to get through as many of these questions as we can. So as Sarah mentioned, I'm going to start with Mark on this one. From Adam Weichman, I appreciate the urgency for significant local action, like transitioning built infrastructure. How can we channel this urgency towards the quote soft infrastructure, like institutions that govern our cities? So what kind of innovations are happening to change institutions as well?
I think, certainly the change of institutions is happening from both the grassroots and from individuals hearing about it. I mean, I think that's the communication message of as people are passionate. I'm amazed as we bring out goals around tree planting and approaching organizations to donate to tree canopy and to adopt streets and to contribute that it's transforming from the inside of people, inside out, to really see that change. And I am inspired regularly by hearing people's stories of where passionate from all levels of organizations that are really seeking and calling out for change. And so seeing that happen is really, I certainly have heard many passionate CEOs that have heard from their employees. And I think that change it's pretty unanimous. I think that we have society, I think is great, suffers from inertia, but as the people are very much, I think they're ahead, they're ahead of where we are and where we need to be. And so I think there's really great support for moving forward.
Great, thank you so much. So the next question, I'm going to ask LG perhaps to attack this one first. This is coming from George Pettit. Given recent weather-induced electric grid infrastructure failure in Texas, what are the risks to electrical grids, generation, and distribution systems, perhaps here in Arizona or in other places in the country, and what can we do to build up the resilience of those systems?
Very hard question to answer really quickly, but the answer is no and yes. The situation does not have to be as bad as it was in Texas. Texas made a decision many years ago to isolate its electric grid from surrounding states and from the rest of the country, and they paid the price for that. They also paid the price for failing to provide resilience in the electric generating system that they do have and in the energy inputs that support that generation. They're going to have to fix that, and they're going to have to reconsider rejoining the rest of the nation in a more integrated grid. On the other hand, I think we have a lot of opportunities in the parts of the country that have seen that renewable energy needs to be moved, let's say from Arizona to California and other load centers, other centers of demand. So we do need more long distance transmission to move our clean power from the places where it's generated. But at the same time, even in places where there may not be a lot of new renewable energy for whatever reason, we can make use of distributed energy resources like microgrids, like maybe it doesn't work for solar power, but it works for wind power. Thinking again about offshore wind that is booming off the east coast of the United States, from across the up and down the Atlantic seaboard. So the short answer is we do need to make some investments if we want to bring more clean energy into our systems, mostly in transmission, but not only in transmission. We also need utility scale storage. We also need microgrids and much greater integration of systems, including software as well as hardware systems, to make the whole system work much better and to be much more resilient. It can be done, and it doesn't have to be prohibitively expensive if every region of the country pitches in. Once again, with their unique contributions. And look how well positioned Arizona is to be a national leader in providing that kind of clean power. It's fantastic. And it really does underscore something I should have mentioned at the very beginning, which is when all is said and done, the icing on this cake is really about new jobs. New job creation, something we're all concerned about right now, is going to be a key additional benefit as we clean up the environment.
Great, thanks, LG. We're going to wrap up shortly. Just a couple final questions. One was addressed to around the question of ASU's research specifically in the this comes from I'm sorry, one second, get back to the question. The question about the cool pavement research. And so ASU's been involved in that research. Jenny, can you just give us a quick summary of what the action is? What kind of research is ongoing? Leslie Hammond asked this question. What are we doing in the cool road surface research, and where are we headed with that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So there are about 8 neighborhoods that got cool pavement last summer, around July, August, September. ASU has been studying in some capacity all 8 neighborhoods. Surface temperatures, air temperatures, subsurface temperatures to see the impact on those. So some of that data has already been collected and we're in the analysis process. And then some is ongoing because we're trying to look at long-term changes. So how much does the reflectivity potential decrease over time? Could this help the lifetime of the pavement itself by keeping surface temperatures down? We also have really nice helicopter overflights with thermal images showing what is the impact on surface temperature of these cool pavement versus the asphalt seal that is often put on. And so while data analysis and collection is ongoing, we do have some results just around what Mark mentioned earlier. So seeing the largest air temperature declines versus areas with asphalt streets just after sunset, which is nice because the greatest magnitude of the urban heat island occurs in the dark overnight. So that's great. The magnitudes of those are not too high, but so if we see a 0.5 degrees Fahrenheit cooling at that time, which is what we're seeing on average across the neighborhoods we studied, that can mean a lot for human health and for energy use and water use in those neighborhoods. However, the surface temperatures can be about -16 degrees Fahrenheit lower in the middle of the day in those neighborhoods compared to asphalt. So the signals differ by time of day, by neighborhood we studied. And of course, there's lots more research that we can do on this as we try and figure out what's the best place and way to apply these cool seals so that we can have the biggest impact on the air temperatures.
Fantastic.
I gotta chime in on one exciting thing about that is that if it does truly extend the life of the pavement, that it will be economic to actually then put this on every surface and every roadway in all of Phoenix, because it's actually becomes cheaper and it lasts longer. So
then your streets department buys right in.
Exciting results. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And I want to make one final point. Mark pointed out in the comments there was a question about COP26, and yes, the city of Phoenix will be represented. Mayor Gallego will be attending COP26, so we'll have participation both from the university and from the city. And I want to make a final note that all of the resources that we've described throughout the event, including links to additional information, including the EDF Costs of Inaction report, which was one of the reports that stimulated the creation of this panel. So we want to say special thank you to EDF for their work and highlighting that. And then I also just want to say thank you once again to Mayor Gallego for her opening comments. Thank you to Mark for your work on from the City of Phoenix and in your role as Sustainability Officer. Thanks to Dr. Vanas for your work doing research in partnership, having such great impact on people's lives. Thanks to LG and your team at EDF for your advocacy and for your action at all levels of government to try to promote solutions. And thank you, Sarah, for your comments, bringing together the highlights and the insights from across our great conversation. And so with that, I will bring our event to a close and say thank you so much to everyone who was able to attend.